Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Troilus and Cressida, and we get to hear from Troilus today in Act 3, Scene 2, which we just finished Act 2 yesterday, so we've got a little bit of catching up to do. And the important things to remember are the Trojans are not just going to give Helen back to the Greeks, so this whole war is going to be over, because that would be bad for their reputations. The Greeks are kind of a mess, but they've decided that Ajax is going to go and fight Hector in this little challenge that Hector has issued instead of Achilles, because that should be a win-win for the Greeks. If Ajax dies, at least they still have Achilles. If Ajax wins, then it knocks Achilles off his high horse a little bit. And in Act 2, Scene 3, they spent some time building up Ajax's ego so that he's like raring to go fight Hector when it comes time for that. And Achilles didn't even bother to come out of his tent and talk to them. So anyway, that was Act 2. Act 3, Scene 1, we start out with Pandarus is going to find Paris. He wants to talk to Paris on behalf of Troilus. And he first runs into Paris's servant, and they do the little banter thing that's very typical with Shakespearean servants, where they misunderstand everything that the other person says. So it feels like wordplay, but it ends up getting really frustrating to the person who's trying to get whatever it is that they need from the servant. So Pandarus gets frustrated because Paris's servant keeps misunderstanding or misinterpreting words. Anyway, as soon as he gets to the point where he's like, I need to talk to Paris on behalf of Troilus, Paris and Helen happen to just enter, and they exchange niceties, and Pandarus is being very, your majesty, your majesty. And he says that he wants to talk to Paris preferably by himself, and Helen's like, no, you shouldn't dismiss me because that's mean and you don't want to upset me, blah, blah, blah. So he's doing a lot of, sort of bowing and scraping and lots of praising of her, but finally gets around to saying that he needs to ask Paris to excuse Troilus from dinner if the king notices at dinner that Troilus is not there. And Paris is like, he's going to have dinner with Cressida, isn't he? And Pandarus is like, no, I don't know where he's having dinner. And there's some more back and forth and some talk of love, and Pandarus sings a love song to Helen and Paris, and there's some more talk of love. And then they're like, who went out to fight today? And Pandarus lists off a bunch of people, Troilus not being among them. And it was like, yeah, because he has some other stuff going on. And it turns out Paris was also not out fighting today because Helen didn't want him to go. But Pandarus is like, so you'll say to the king that you'll make excuses for Troilus at dinner. And they're like, yeah, we will. So Pandarus leaves. And then Paris is like, Helen, let's go greet the men as they come back from the war. And can you help take off Hector's armor because you can help charm him, that sort of thing. She's like, yeah, that'll be great. And that's the end of Act 3, Scene 1. So Act 3, Scene 2 starts off again with Pandarus and now Troilus's servant, and he's like, where is he? Very brief exchange. Troilus comes in. Pandarus is like, have you seen Cressida? And Troilus is like, no, I'm sitting here waiting for her and I cannot wait for her to show up. I want her to show up. And Pandarus is like, hang on a second, I'll go get her. And he leaves, and Troilus has a moment to himself on the stage, and he says, I'm giddy. Expectation whirls me round. The imaginary relish is so sweet that it enchants my sense. What will it be when that the watery palate's taste indeed love's thrice reputed nectar? Death, I fear me, sounding destruction, or some joy too fine, too subtle, potent, and too sharp in sweetness for the capacity of my ruder powers. I fear it much. And I do fear besides that I shall lose distinction in my joys, as doth a battle when they charge on heaps the enemy flying. So when we started in on Troilus and Cressida, I mentioned that I had inklings at one point that it was sort of Romeo and Juliet meets Coriolanus. Coriolanus for the war part, Troilus and Cressida, or Romeo and Juliet for the love story part. And if that's true, remember it's about Act 3, Scene 2-ish that Romeo and Juliet get married, and also where we get Juliet's, gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds monologue. And that's almost what this is. Troilus is just really, really anxious to see Cressida. He's in love with her, or as in love with her as the character of Troilus can be. He's really excited to meet her, to like see her, and to kiss her, is basically what this boils down to. He's excited that they're actually gonna finally get to spend some time together being lovers. So it's kind of like Juliet's "Gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds" monologue, but a little bit less so, because, well, we'll see the quality of the relationship between Troilus and Cressida as it continues to unfold, and we'll see more parallels between what happens in this Act 3, Scene 2, and what happens between Romeo and Juliet when they do actually get to get married, that kind of a thing. There's some interesting parallels, which is also an interesting commentary, I think, on what happens to lovers in a time of war. But anyway, getting ahead of myself. So he's very excited for Cressida to show up, and Pandarus comes back in. He's like, she's ready. Are you ready? Like, you ready? She's like, right there. I can go get her. You ready? She's like, all done up. She's ready. Pandarus leaves a second time, and Troilus gets another moment to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she's finally coming in. And then Pandarus brings Cressida in, and we'll get to hear a monologue as they enter tomorrow. I will see you then for that. Mwah.